Deciding that I was going to learn 7 languages this year was a freaking awesome idea and has resulted in my finally knowing what my next long-term language will be. Here is why, here is how. If you're new to the channel, then welcome, and just know that no, I'm not saying that you really can learn 7 languages in a year. You could of course spend 15 hours a day for 52 days for each language, and if you did that for an entire year and lived to tell the tale would just be a garbled mess of sounds. Healthcare. But if you're old to the channel, then you might remember that at the end of last year, I said I would spend this year dabbling in getting little bits and pieces of 6 other languages, plus continuing with my main one, which was Swedish. Now, it is important to remember why. Long story short, my Swedish still could be a lot better, but when I watch it or read it or listen to it, it feels basically like English. I have almost zero difficulty understanding anything in Swedish, and that makes it feel reasonably unproductive to spend time in. I got so used to having to work to process everything I heard, so much so that when I finally passed that level in Swedish, I'd be thinking, why do you speak so freaking clearly and slowly? I was actually a bit addicted to the feeling of not understanding everything, to the point that I had an affair, a fling, an escapade, if you will, with Turkish for about 3 days. And one of the things that I loved about that was that I had no clue what was going on, ever. I have no idea what any of this means. But around that time, I was not yet ready to choose a new language. It wasn't that I didn't want to choose Turkish, it was just that I wanted to choose one more carefully this time. I wanted to be sure that I was choosing a language that I would be interested in to begin with, one that I could remain interested in for the long term, and one that would help me take this channel in the direction that I want it to go. So I decided to give myself a year to think about it, meaning this year. And during the year, I was supposed to do some dabbling in various languages for up to 2 months each. The 2-month rule was to prevent me from getting obsessed and going all in on any one language. Did it go according to plan? What, don't you know anything about experiments? You can't have an experiment that goes according to plan because that's not an experiment. That's a plan. I'm pretty sure you called it a plan. I'm talking to these people, not to you. Shut up and leave me alone. You are alone. So anyway, no, it didn't go according to plan at all, but it totally worked. The thing is, I didn't much like dabbling. The first 2 months I spent entirely in Russian, and I was doing a lot, so I thought, because I was in the Diamond League on Duolingo, but I didn't understand anything in Russian. If I didn't know any better, I would say that Duolingo doesn't really work, but we know that it does work because Duolingo conducted a study and found that Duolingo was very effective. And then, true to my word, after 2 months of Russian, I stopped. And untrue to my word, I didn't pick up anything else for a week and a month and 2 months, and then I realized that whatever language I was supposed to do in that 2 months didn't happen. And then that happened a few more times, and now it's November. I can't believe it's November! So it was, I guess you could say, a total failure. But also, what I didn't do was get obsessed with any other language and dive headfirst into that, which, remember, was actually the goal. Is anyone else confused? No, it's not confusing. And that, my friends, was flippin' genius and has paid off. Here's why. All year, and particularly in these last few weeks, I've been looking for some kind of sign as to what language to learn next year. But the problem is, when you look for signs, you tend to see them everywhere. Like, I'd be thinking about that question, and my wife would say, hey, we're having spaghetti bolognese for dinner, and I'd be like, is this God telling me to learn Italian? No, God is telling you to stop eating pasta for every meal, you idiot. So knowing that different languages and cultures are represented in some way all around us all the time, particularly in my city, I know that you can't just take everything as being a sign. But one day, just last week, there was what you might call a strange convergence of events, a series of signs, I guess, that for me put an end to the discussion. So I wake up and I've got a message from Ollie Richards saying, hey mate, we're about to start Black Friday deals on the StoryLearning courses. Do you want some affiliate links? And I was like, yes, but just let me redo the StoryLearning just to remember what it's actually like, because I do like to try things that I recommend. So I picked a language essentially at random to try it out with, and I was like, this is awesome. This is going to be the year's second and final dabbling language. And I was having a great time with the StoryLearning courses. I thought it was really top-notch stuff. Right now you can get the course of your choice for $97 instead of the usual almost $300. I was enjoying it so much that I couldn't really tell if it was the language I liked or the course, but let's be honest, it was probably both. Those are affiliate links, they're in the description. They do help me to keep making these videos, but obviously being Black Friday, they are available for a limited time, so don't miss out. So that was in the morning. I'd spent about 2 hours on StoryLearning, learning a language that I didn't really have any intention to continue, because that's just what having this channel entails. I sometimes learn languages that I'm not actually learning. But later that day, I went to a secondhand book fair that comes to each city every 6 months, and I always go because it's really big and it's way more fun than shopping for new stuff, because you never know what you're going to find. There's a bunch of random stuff, and the money goes to an important charity here. And when I went for the first time about 2 years ago, basically the entire foreign book section, or more than half of the foreign book section, was Swedish. I don't know how that happened, but it was awesome, and I pretty much bought them out of everything they had. But the last couple of times, it's been nothing. Not even like much Danish or Norwegian. I bet the people who set up the fair every time are like, oh, finally some idiot took all those freaking Swedish books. Good riddance. But this time, remember that language that I'd tested with StoryLearning just a few hours before the book fair? Suddenly, that was soup of the day. Now look, obviously if StoryLearning has this language, then it's not the most obscure thing in the world. It's not like I'm claiming that I've never seen a book in this language before. But when I say it was flavor of the day, normally the foreign section is about 200 to 300 books in total, and that will be a pretty even smattering of like the top 10 languages spoken in this city, and then maybe one random Hungarian dictionary. That's where this one came from. That means that there's normally a lot of Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian, Macedonian, Arabic, Greek, Vietnamese. But this time, and I'm not making this up, basically the entire section was just this one language that I'd happened to be studying earlier that morning. There were even some English books that I've always wanted to read but never gotten around to, translated into that language. Like this one. Okay, so I get that that's still not a come and feel the holes in my hands level of sign, but as I mentioned, this is a charity. I'm always happy to buy books from them, especially if they're foreign ones. I can fill up the shelf and make it look cooler. Here's where it gets a little bit weird. My son is part of a club, or I guess you'd call it a team, who makes things and submits them to competitions. I can't be more specific than that. We get home from the book fair that day. My wife checks her email and finds out that the team has performed well enough in a tournament earlier this year that they, and if it's feasible, accompanying family members, have been invited to compete overseas in 2023. Guess where?